Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on Dog Works Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog. Available on Dog Works Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Dog Works Radio Network presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And calling in today is one of the mushers that's heading over to Sweden for the World Championships. He has been on the show a couple of times, so we welcome back Chris Speers. Chris, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well this evening. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for joining us. Chris, can you do us a favor and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Speers, and I live here in Lafayette, Indiana. And I do a lot of primarily dryland mushing with competing in Canicross and also 4-dog reg events. And once in a while I'll get into some bike touring, but not too much. And we do some sled races on snow as well as the season gets there. But primarily dryland is our main focus.
So you are literally in the middle of the country. I don't think you get a lot of snow there in Lafayette. So a lot of your training trains you up just exactly for what you're doing over in Sweden with the dryland events. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it works perfect. We don't get the amount of snow that is normally found up in the northern states like Wisconsin and Michigan. So we do a lot of runs and training and on the country roads with the dogs just because of the lack of vehicles and the condition of the ground that they run on allows for a lot of mileage I can put on the dogs in that 2, 3, 4 miles that we need to be able to get a good training in.
So, Chris, you are one of the mushers that I think a lot of listeners can really relate to because you have dogs that are literally part of your family. A lot of them stay in the house and you take them out on trips with you, and you do things that a lot of people do with their pet dogs compared to us long-distance mushers. We can't really load up 40 dogs and take them to the grocery store. How do you manage to do that living in a rather large city? Lafayette is quite the size, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a pretty big, pretty large community. There's Purdue University where I work at as well. So there's quite a bit of pretty vast community. It's split, especially 2 cities, West Lafayette and Lafayette, and it's split by a river that runs through them. Fortunately, I live on the south side of the county, so it gets me away from the noise and hustle of the city and the town life, and really allows me to be able to be a little more loose with the dogs and be able to accommodate the dogs a little bit better than trying to have them stuffed in a city or like in town where they're kind of limited on where they can be. So that's really been a big advantage to that, as well as having place for them to run around in the backyard.
So, Chris, you've been competing in dryland mushing for quite a while. I think you and I spoke here on Mushing Radio 3 or maybe even 4 years ago when you were just getting involved with it pretty heavily. But now you're heading over to the World Championships in Sweden, and I can't wait to talk to you about that. I think you're the 10th or 11th person on the team that I've spoken to, and you're actually the guy that spearheaded this entire discussion with all of the teammates. So I want to thank you for that. But before we get into all of that and the logistics and whatnot, let's talk a little bit about your dogs. How many do you have? Where do they come from? And maybe just a real quick story about each of them.
Yeah. So I've got right now I keep very low numbers of dogs. Right now I have 3 dogs, and the oldest one is a Trooper. He's a little bit of a smaller dog. He's one of the ones I've had the longest. I've got him from Cheswick, which is a common, popular racing family up in Michigan, and they do a lot more of the open class type of races, and so that's where he comes from. He's been he can run all of them can run pretty much all the positions or race all the different positions, and so as he's gotten older, he's probably around 6 years old, so he's starting to kind of get to the tail end of his peak performance, but he still has the enthusiasm. And so what's really kind of interesting, I always tell people, I was coming back from vacation, and I was telling someone on the plane yesterday as I was traveling back, and they asked if the dogs like it, and he's my prime example I give of dogs that, dogs really like racing and competing, because he's one of, if you were just to come out and see him, he's more timid, he's more shy. When he's at the vehicle at a race, he's usually underneath the car, so you never really see him in the spotlight too much. But as soon as he sees that harness, or as soon as he knows, his inclination tells him, hey, we're going for a run, even if I don't tell him, he totally flips the switch 180, and he's probably the noisiest dog then at that point. He can be the most low-key dog, or he can be the most high-key dog, depending. So that's kind of the funny story with that guy. He's pretty calm, pretty easygoing, but once he sees the line and his harness, then he's pretty much ready to run. And then the second dog I have is Surge. I got him from over in Pennsylvania, and he does come from some of the Cheswick lines, and he's got some of more limited sprint class lines on him, and he's been my main canicross dog I've been using for ever since he was probably about 1 or so. He really showed a lot of enthusiasm for running, and he's really been able to be a great companion. So we've done a lot of different canicross races, both locally, and he's the one I took to Poland for the 2017 World Championship. And so, he's been a really good dog. He's full of energy, loves to run. He's kind of got the opposite personality of Trooper, where he's more out there running around, having fun, and you don't really see him laying around too much. And then, of course, when he sees the harness, then he goes crazy as well, and especially once he's hooked up. So he comes from actually Linda Nino. She's out over in Pennsylvania, and I got her from just word of mouth. I just heard about a dog when I was looking, and so it's one I've never actually seen him. The first time I ever, it was just based on photos and everything else, and just talking with her about the different dogs and everything, and I kind of had an idea of what I wanted. So, but yeah, he's been a really good dog for me. And then the third one, he's kind of got a long name. His name is full name is Don Juan's Kryptonite, or as I say, BJ Kryptonite. So I gotta figure, well, for, racing horses can have long names. Why can't dogs have long names too? So his breeder is actually in Sweden, which is interesting because he'll be going back to his mainland country. So, but the breeder named him BJ or Don Juan, and I kind of had Kryptonite, so I just stuck them together. And he's the youngest of them all. He's 2 years old, so he's been really phenomenal this past season. We've done a little bit of puppy training when he was little, not too much, but just enough to give him a little bit of a taste of it when he was, 7, 8 months. And then I started racing him when he was about 12, 13 or 14 months, in that range, and doing a little bit more. And so as he's gotten more mature and as he's been getting the experience, I've been able to put him in racing lead past couple races. And so one of those bigger ones that he's been leading was last spring dryland race. So he's really been proving himself. He is actually a pure German Shorthair pointer, whereas the other two are the Alaskan, half pointer mixes of either German Shorthair or English pointer, and a little bit of greyhound to some degree. But he is Don Juan, or DJ. He is a full German Shorthair pointer from Sweden. So it was kind of a interesting dog. When I was looking for dogs, I was like, I want to get a dog from Europe, just because there's not too many of these dogs you can find in North America, and they're very limited or hard to find if you do. So it's so he's been turning out to be real well, and him and Serge are probably the best of buds anyone could ask for. So they really accommodate each other really well, and they're a lot of fun to just kind of watch them in the backyard or hanging out in the hammock,
I love to hear the stories about people's dogs, and every one of them has a personality, and every one of them has traits that intertwine into the team for sure. So Chris, I talked about you being the catalyst for our Dryland Musher series here on the show. A few months ago, you reached out and asked me if I could interview all you guys, but I want to ask a question in relation to the Poland trip. I know that I think I'm speaking to about 12 or 13 of you guys over the course of this series. How many guys or gals went over with you to Poland?
Yeah, so we had a team, I think it was about a half a dozen that we had. I know of the ones that are going now, I think most of all of them are going. There's a couple that weren't in Poland, or that were in Poland that weren't going, but this year it seems like we've got a really good number of people that that have applied and have made the team. So that's really exciting to see. The trip to Poland was a little bit smaller, but it was a little more, it was a really good way of getting to know everybody, especially since we all stayed in the same place over there in Poland. So we were really able to get to know the people that we may not see at our local venues that we race at locally, and you might just know them based on through Facebook or other social media. So I'm really looking forward to that with this trip too, is being able to get in touch with some of the people that I may not have ever heard of before, or just have recently connected with through this experience.
So, Chris, I was talking just the other day to a really world-class sprint musher up here in Alaska. He runs for Rondi and the ONAC and that sort of thing. And he was telling me that the Europeans are truly a different breed of athlete, not necessarily the dog, but the people themselves. And a lot of times when Americans go over, they just beat us to death because they just excel so much at their sport. What are your thoughts on that about the Europeans and or the Swedish folks that are just so dominant in the dryland classes and even the sprint classes over in Europe there?
Yeah, I think it really falls true. You see, like in the a lot of the Olympic sports as well. Whenever you see, there's a lot of domination, especially like when you're looking at like some of the skiing events. So I think there's a lifestyle of just being active and being outgoing, and I think that kind of helps promote people that live in Europe. If they follow that lifestyle, it kind of really helps them in other areas of where they can be active. But I don't know if it's I imagine that's a big part of it. And it's also, I think it's just the popularity of the sport is a lot larger there. So there's a greater pool of people that are competing over in those areas. And sometimes it's harder for certain countries, if you're an athlete trying to make the team, than it is here. And a lot of it is due to that popularity. And having the right type of dog is a really big asset to anyone who's competing in these sled dog events. So being a person who is really, who's got that part going for them in terms of active and fitness level and conditioning level, that's part of it. But also a lot of it is determined by the dog as well. And it all depends on the sport, I think, too. So with dryland racing on a cart, it doesn't take quite the physical capability of the musher athlete as it does like in like canicross or bike touring or even scooter classes, where it's probably more 60%, 70% the human aspect, versus on the rig it's a lot more of the dog and the type of dog that you're competing with. And a lot of us also training regimen that as well. So I think that's a really big key. It's just the the popularity, I think, is a big part, as well as the lifestyle that they live over there. I think is a lot more aggressive than perhaps here sometimes.
That
I think, yeah.
That's a great point, Chris, that you had mentioned the lifestyle portion of it. I think a lot of people, maybe not on the elite level of dog sports, but by and large, I think a lot of people see dog-powered sports as a recreational opportunity over here in the U.S. They work full-time, then they go out and they run their dogs, and then, they do other things in their life. And I know that a lot of other countries don't have it that way. They take things in a much more different light than we do over here. For us, we love sitting around watching television and, hanging out on the computer and that sort of thing. But when the lifestyle is so much different, I think that can really have a play into it. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, and it's, like for me personally, it helped with my life, making that life transition through the sport. I think I've covered where I used to weigh like 100 pounds heavier than what I've done now. And so the full sports really motivated me, and I think that's the thing is a big positive thing that dog-powered sports can do. I think competition, regardless, should bring out the best in the individual as well as the team. just to make you more competitive and make you work harder for it. And so it's harder to do it, and if you're not fully intent on it. So you got to put more emphasis into it. And you can't do that if you're just sitting around or doing something. And I think a lot of times it's complicated by schedules too. So it's not necessarily the lifestyle that a person lives in terms of habit and diet and that part of it. It's just also, I think, how much time do you have to invest into it, to yourself and to your dogs, and being able to take the time to put in that effort is also key, I think, too. So, and some people are just into it more for fun, and that's good, but I think it brings out for me more of my competitive spirit and kind of helps push me to try to get better or improve or look at ways to do those things.
Excellent. Chris, we have about 10 minutes or so left, and I definitely have a bunch of questions for you in regards to heading over to Sweden. I've talked to a lot of you guys, and most of you are doing either Canicross or the 1-dog or 2-dog bike, and you're the only second rig person that's heading over. Just a lady that I spoke to just this past weekend is doing that as well. Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of traveling over with multiple dogs? And then secondly, Chris, are you bringing over your own rig, or are you going to borrow, lease, rent one over there?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a story in itself, is the logistical issues of this. It's there's always, of course, doing the paperwork for the dogs and getting them approved. And those are the things I've kind of experienced with taking one dog. And so I part of this trip and part of doing this is kind of the challenge of doing it. It's one thing to go over there and compete and do as best as you can, which I plan to do, and I will be training for that. But it's also just an educational experience. And so for me, I found it difficult to get air flights over, being able to get an airline that will allow me to take all 3 dogs. And so a lot of the times they want you to either buy the ticket ahead of time, and then within that cancellation period, you need to be approved for flight for all the dogs. So you got to have the weights of the dogs, the size of the crates that you'll be using, and you kind of have to have all that set up ahead of time, because a lot of times they might just limit you to maybe 3 dogs on a flight total. So you have to kind of ensure that no one else is flying with their pet. So traveling with other team members, because of that, makes it a little bit harder to do. And also, like, the vehicle. So I'm still working on the vehicle aspect of it. And maybe embarrassing to say, but I don't have much experience with driving a stick shift. So over there in Europe, of course, the rental cars are more stick or manuals than they are automatics, whereas here they're more automatics and not too many stick shifts for vehicle rentals. So it's being able to find a vehicle that'll work for me for that and be able to accommodate all the equipment and the dogs that I've got to use to transport. And kind of a side note to the World Championships, will be going and trying to compete in the Latvia World Cup, which I'm hoping to do. So I figure half the battle is getting over to Europe with the 3 dogs, and I might as well spend a little time, spend more time and enjoy the experience and kind of get around and venture with the dogs. So it kind of goes with living life and enjoying life with the dogs. And so the other challenge I found is being able to take a vehicle into Latvia, and then I realized that I've got to take a ferry. So there's all those different logistics I've got to figure it out and get it straightened out. But like I say, getting over there is half the battle. So with the plane travel all secure. I'm pretty much set on that aspect. We've got the lodging that can accommodate my dogs as well as the other person in Marla, who is going to be competing with her team. I'm not sure if she's taken 3 or 4, but I'll have my 3, and we should be able to accommodate all the dogs and us and her handler for that. So in terms of rig, it's hard to take extra equipment over and trying to do it lightly. So I was able to kind of network and actually found one of the main event sponsors. I might butcher the name, but I think it's Axico or something. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but I was reaching out to in regards to being able to rent a rig or a cart, and fortunately enough, they've got one I can rent. So for that weekend of racing, so that's going to be a huge help to be able to do that. And then in regards to going and doing the same in Latvia, I might have to borrow a cart. Otherwise, I would just probably do Canicross and just kind of visit and, network with other people and just kind of watch and learn how they do it in Europe, because I think they do things, they set up differently in Europe than they do here with regards to staging their vehicles, and what they use for vehicles are different. You don't see too many big dog trucks and all that. So right now I just haul my dogs in an old Subaru Outback, and they're all in the back. So over there I'll probably rent either a minivan of sorts or a SUV type vehicle where I can have the dogs all in the back. And I also learned I've got to be able to have a way to secure them so they can't get into the front, so they're not climbing all over the place. So there's all these different things I'm starting to learn and realize, and so we'll see how far we can go with this.
Chris, I think you answered a lot of the questions I was going to ask, so I only have time for a couple of more, if you don't mind. I spoke with Nick Weiss, and he was awesome in providing information about rules and things in regards to drug testing and all that sort of thing, but I did not have a chance to ask him about the rules of running dogs in more than one class. I know over here in ISDRA rules, they have specific rules set up where a dog can or cannot run in more than one class, say Canicross and cart, or cart and scooter, etc., etc. What are the rules for this championship for the dogs? Are they allowed to run in multiple classes or not?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, they can run multiple classes with that. So I think it's set to a certain distance of maybe like 10 or 15 kilometers. They can't run more than that during a day. So they do have those restrictions, and so that's something that would have to be looked at, especially since I might be looking at borrowing a dog. One of the things I am okay with is with my 3 is for the Canicross events, those are going to be Thursday, Friday events, I believe is the dates for those, or it'll be on a Thursday and a Friday with the Canicross events, and then Saturday and Sunday will be the rig events. So the dog DJ pointer I have, he'll be doing both events. So he'll be racing all 4 days. So it'll be interesting to see how well he can do and how well he can recover. So being able to get him recovered well enough and rested up enough to compete the next all 4 days will be really critical for me. And I'm looking at maybe borrowing potentially a dog from another team member or teammate. And so being able to look into that rule a little bit more, that's just one of those logistical things I've been just starting to look into, but time will be coming up pretty quick here. We got maybe 2.5 months, I guess, and then we'll be starting up the trial and race season, and then it'll be heading off to Europe. So, but yeah, I think that's what the rules are set at about per day. So it's not overdoing the dog and putting the dog under too much exhaustion and stress, which is really, really important, I think, for overall dog care.
Last question, Chris, for you here on the show. Is there anyone that you would like to thank or give a shout out to?
Yeah, I would definitely want to give a shout out to my parents and family members who kind of put up with some of the stuff. You know, they live kind of far away, but you know, they sometimes help, or, you know, whenever I'm traveling with the dog, you know, they'll, you know, kind of put up with it. Also, my neighbors are really amazing with the dogs. I live out in the country or out in the county. So, but I still have neighbors that are fairly close. So they really help tremendously with the dogs. They put up with the dogs, even though I've got strict rules with my dogs that they can't be overly obnoxious. So, but that really helps a lot. Also, the local insurance agency, Blevins Insurance, has been my sponsor for past few years or so, and so their support's really meant a lot to me. And also to God for allowing me to do this, and I think that this dog mushing and this racing has really been a big influence in my life, and it's really been helpful. So, you know, God's been watching over me. I travel because there's 6 to 8 hours one-way trips that I take, 3 or 4 times a month. So it's a lot of road travel, and I've gotten into some pretty sketchy situations traveling, sometimes. So that's also a big blessing to be able to have that safety and everything else. So, but yeah, I think it's just a lot of family and friends who helped. Pretty much sure everyone I've got to thank right now.
Chris, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Again, thank you so much for setting up this series for us. I'm sure our listeners are really going to enjoy it. And for folks that just happened to catch Chris's show, check out our library. We have 10, 11, 12 other interviews with the athletes that are heading over to Sweden. Chris, good luck over in Sweden, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Okay, well, thanks, Robert. It's been great talking with you, and hopefully everybody enjoys the series.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Goodbye.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio. Did you know that Alaska DogWorks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska DogWorks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.